Hello and welcome to this second tutorial on extruding 3D text and shapes in After Effects. In the first tutorial we looked at the duplication method and I demonstrated the simple expression that can be used to make the job so much easier, and we created some 3D text, but we also created this shape which we managed to get animating on, which I think looks great and is very simple. The next option I want to look at is the Shatter method. Now the Shatter method can actually render very quickly, so that when you create something and you want to do a camera animation on it, it moves very quickly and can save you quite a bit of time. You can't actually, unfortunately, get this animation that you can get with the duplication method, because Shatter only looks at the first frame of the image that you actually want to shatter. But even so, it's a very powerful method and can produce some really high quality results if done properly. So let's move on and have a look at the Shatter effect. Okay, so I've got a composition that says shatter. There's nothing in it, so what do? We create a layer, new solid, and to that layer, which we're going to make composition size, let's rename that one the Shatter Effect, because we will have quite a few layers and it's good to know which one we have the effect applied to. And then let's apply the effect. So effect, simulation, shatter. Okay, so what do we have here? Well, we have something that shatters. Just going to make my composition fit. If I pull my timeline through, you'll see that it shatters. Now, what actually happens is forces are applied to a layer. So this cyan line around the outside shows the extent of the forces, and the blue lines show the actual forces where they're coming through. And then wherever this force touches the background layer, so you'll notice it's just touching this brick here, the whole of this brick will shatter. So if I start to pull it through, you'll see that the whole of the brick at that point shatters. But what I want you to notice is that these bricks have actually got depth. They've actually got 3D depth. And what we want to actually take from the shatter effect is not the shattering, we don't want it to shatter, but we do want to take advantage of this 3D depth. If I actually go from wireframe of forces to rendered, again you'll see that there is actually depth to these layers. And if you open up shape here, you can actually extrude that depth, so I can take it from 0.2 and I can make them quite a lot thicker. So we can create 3D items and we can make them whatever depth we want to make them, but what we really don't want them to do is shatter. Okay, so how does shatter work? I'm going to go back to wireframe of forces and I'm actually going to open up 3ds Max because I've got a demonstration here. The blue represents the layer that you want to shatter. The green represents the force applied to the layer. So when you open up Shatter, it looks like this. The force is applied to the layer and all of this area is going to shatter. But the advantage is you can pull the force back so that just a limited area would shatter, or the whole of the layer shatters, or none of the layer shatters. And what we want to do is move the forces back so that no shatter is applied to the layer, but the layer still has an extruded 3D depth. Let's go back to After Effects and see how to do that. What you want to do is open up your camera tab down here, camera position, and let's rotate in the Y rotation. And as we rotate round, we see what I was talking about. These blue lines represent the force. And all we need to do under force 1, open up force 1, is pull the depth forward so that it's not touching the layer. So if you take it to about, I reckon about 0.5, it's not touching the layer, and so no matter how much we scrub the timeline, nothing is happening, but still, let me just move the camera so we can see the side onto that layer, still there is some depth to this layer. Let me go back to rendered, and you'll see that there is depth to that layer. So nothing's going to shatter, so nothing's going to fall, there's not going to be any physics, nothing's going to shatter, but yet this layer has still got depth that we can extrude. So we can make it really deep, we can make it really narrow, however we want to do it. Now what we need to do is make shatter not look at the layer, but look at the item that we actually want to shatter. So let's just reset our camera, so right click on Y rotation and choose reset. And let's create some text that we want to shatter. So I'm going to take the text tool and imaginatively I'm going to type text and drag that into the middle of my composition. Now a note, I know people that create text 4 times the size that they eventually want to use it in and apply shatter to that. The thinking behind it is this: if you have a huge composition of text and you apply shatter to that, and then you shrink it down to your final usage, you are going to avoid any quality issues when you zoom into the text. So if you know that you're going to get quite close into the text, what you want to do is create an original composition 4 times the size. How do you do that? Well, you would select your composition. I'm just going to demonstrate, I'm not actually going to do it. Go to composition settings, and then where it says width, you just click at the end and you go asterisk 4 times 4, hit return, and that would make it 4 times the width, and do the same under height, 576 asterisk 4, and then it would be 4 times the height. And then you have a composition 4 times the size. Then you would do all of this to that, and then you would create the final piece that you want to work in and pull in that composition, that shatter composition 4 times the size, and scale it down. And then when you zoom in, you're going to maintain some high resolution. But I'm not going to do that, but I just thought you ought to know that that's how it's done. Now we've created the text, and actually I'm going to turn it off because I don't need to see it, and I'm going to click on the layer that says Shatter Effect so that I can actually see the Shatter Effect. And we're not now going to look at Force 1, we're not going to look at Force 2, we're not going to look at Gradient, we're not going to look at Physics, but we will be looking at Shape, Texture, briefly at Camera Position, maybe Lightings and Materials. Okay, so Shape. At the moment it says Bricks, which is what we saw in the original. There are plenty of others to play with if you've never played with Shatter before, but what we're looking for is the one right at the top, Custom. And then under Custom there is a tongue twister, Custom Shatter Map. Try saying that 3 times quickly. And then under that we have a drop down, and we can choose any layer in our composition, and obviously we want to choose text 1. And then we have 3D extruded text. How do I know it's 3D? Well, if I start to pull up the extrusion depth, you can begin to see over here that there's some depth, and over here that's some depth. And if we go back down to our camera and do Y rotation, you'll begin to see that that is 3D text. Now when you go side on, when you have a duplication method, you start to see all the layers. Obviously with Shatter you'll see that you don't see the layers. It is truly 3D. However, it doesn't look too brilliant at the side or the back. There's a few things we can do about that, which I'll come to a bit later on, but it is true 3D text, and as you can see, scrubbing with the camera, it renders really quickly and looks great. Well, I say it looks great. Really, we want to change the colour of this text. We want it to look different, and anyway, when we made our original text it was blue, but actually when it comes in it's green. It's using the same colour as the original layer that Shatter was applied to apply to the text. Now you might have thought that you could go into your text layer and you could change it and you could add effects and you could pre-compose it and it would show up. None of that works. When you've created your text, if you want to change the way it looks, what we need to do is start using this tab here that says Textures. Now when you look at textures, you'll see it says front layer, side layer and back layer. Basically we can create a new layer in our composition, add a wonderful texture to it, and then have that texture applied to the front, the side and the back of our item. So let's do that. We go Layer, New Solid, and we're going to call this our texture. Click OK, and to that let's apply a few effects. So effects, noise and grain, let's choose turbulent noise, and one other effect, let's do effect, color correction, and let's choose tritone, and I'm going to change the middle one to a nice royal blue, something like that. Yeah, that looks okay. Click OK. Now I can apply the texture. Now you'd have thought all you needed to do was now say under textures, say to the front, I can choose texture and turn off texture so we can see it, but nothing's applied. The reason being that the layer it's looking for is just the layer. It's not looking for, I'm going to turn on texture again, the effects that we have applied to that layer. Is looking at the base layer. So what we need to do is force the shatter effect to look at the layer with all the effects baked into it. How do we do that? We simply select the layer and go Layer, Pre-Compose, move all attributes to the new composition and let it be called Texture Comp 1, that's fine. Click OK, and now it's applied. Because the shatter effect is looking at Texture Comp 1, which is the layer with all the effects baked in. And we can of course do the same with the side. So we've got side layer, we can do the same, Texture Comp 1. And now we have that texture applied to the front and the side. If I start to do a bit of rotation on the Y rotation, you can see that that's actually applied. It's a bit dark, mind, but there's other things we can do about that. It's not applied to the back, but if we want to apply it to the back, we obviously have the option here, back layer, drop down, texture comp 1, it's on the back as well. Okay, so we've applied the texture. Let's brighten it up a bit. It's a bit dark. So I'm going to close down my texture tab. I don't need to look at that anymore. I don't need to look at my shape. We've chosen that and we've extruded it about as deep as we want to go. We've got the camera, but we also have lighting down here. If you open up lighting, you'll see that we can do things like change the ambient light level. We can change the intensity of the actual light that's been applied. Now notice we've got three options. We've got a point source, which gives us a point light, distance source, and also if you have a light in your composition, you can actually choose the first composition light to be the light that you use. It's up to you which one you choose, but you'll see you've got lots of lighting options here. We can change the light intensity to make the whole thing look a lot brighter. Now you can play with the lighting as you like. I'll be using another light a bit later on, but you can have a play with those. There are also some material options at the bottom. I'm not going to go through these, but do bear in mind that if you want the item to look more metallic or plasticky with a different kind of reflection, you can actually play with those material options, but that's maybe for another tutorial at another day for material options on 3D layers. Okay, I've applied this texture comp. What I can also do is I can animate the texture. So if I double click to open that, select the layer, let's animate our turbulent noise. So let's go to the beginning and let's animate our evolution. Go forward 2 seconds and let's do, say, 2 whole revolutions. So hit 2, enter. Now we've got our texture comp animating, and if we go back to our shatter comp, which has got that texture comp applied, and we start to pull it through, notice that the texture is animating on our text, which can look really cool. Now previously in the duplication method, we wanted to add something like the glass effect or the bevel alpha effect to make this look even better. However, if you try and apply that to the texture comp or to the shatter effect itself, it's not really going to have a lot of effect. So let's choose the shatter effect and let's say effect, perspective, say bevel alpha. And all it does is give us this, well, this kind of sort of halo-y look, which is interesting but not really, I think, what we're looking for. So I'm going to turn off bevel alpha. I'm going to delete that. Let's try CC glass. So effect, stylize, CC glass, and that doesn't really do anything. Usually that would have a very dramatic effect, but it just gives it a slight shift in brightness. No, if you want to apply effects like that, what you actually need to do is add an adjustment layer to the top of our stack. So you go layer, new, adjustment layer, and on that adjustment layer we can add things like CC glass. Well, let's just try the bevel alpha, effect, perspective, bevel alpha. Unfortunately, it's not going to work for us. It's going to give us the same result, unless of course we do actually pick the color that we want, and then maybe we can actually bevel the alpha, but it's not really going to give us the solution that we want. If we really want to make a difference to it, I think bevel alpha is not really a suitable solution. However, CC glass does work. So let's go down to stylize, CC glass. It's a bit extreme, so let's open it up and reduce the surface displacement down to say 20. Let's look at that. And there you go, we've got quite a nice effect. It's been applied. Now that looks pretty good as is, and you could certainly use it in a composition that way, and we can actually do an animation, say, of the text itself. So let's open up our Shatter Effect and let's animate our camera. At the moment we're at -38. Let's go to the beginning and hit keyframe for Y rotation. Go forward 2 seconds and let's take it to +38, say. And there we go. We've got quite a nice looking animation with some text that looks pretty cool, with the glass effect applied, with an animating texture. We can play around with the lights and materials and we can make that look fairly good. Now let's go on and add some shadows. So to do that we actually need to add another layer, which is going to be our background. Layer, new, solid. We can leave it the same color and let's just call this one BG for background. Hit OK. Now what I want you to notice is that the shatter effect has been applied to a 2D layer. So what we really need to do is take the background and drop it at the bottom. However, we've got this hazing around, which is based on the fact that we've got an adjustment layer at the top which has got the glass effect applied. So what we need to do now is we need to shift select the top layers and pre-compose them. So layer, pre-compose, and call this our text animation. Click OK. And now we've avoided the hazing that goes around it. And we can make that layer 3D and our background layer 3D, and we can create a light. So go Layer, New, Light. I'm going to go with my settings that I've already got set up. So I've got a yellow light, its intensity at 128, cone angle at 90, cone feather at 50, and I've played around with the shadows here just to give it a slightly more diffuse shadow. Usually it comes in at 100 and 0, and that gives a very sharp shadow. But if you want to make the shadow less sharp, as I quite often do, I'm going to reduce the shadow darkness to about 80, and I'm going to increase the shadow diffusion, and all that's going to do is give us a much softer shadow, and click OK. Right, I'm going to pull the light back, and then I'm going to select the text layer and also pull that out in Z space. At the moment, however, I'm not casting any shadows. Why is that? Well, I need to open up the material options for this text animation pre-comp. Open that up, open up materials. Quick way of getting to these, by the way, is AA. And then where it says cast shadows, I need to click on, and then you can see I've got some pretty decent shadows. Even those might be a bit too strong for me, so if they're too strong, you go back up to your light, double click your light, and you can reduce the darkness of the shadow, and you can increase the diffusion of the shadow, and click OK. And there we go. The text is responding to the light. So whereas originally, before we had this light, it was very blue, we've got a yellow light in. We've changed the way it looks entirely. We can change the color of the light. We can take it to white, and then it will reflect the actual original colors of the set. So by playing with this light, I'm affecting the way that the colors look, and I'm going to take it back a bit, or Control Z a couple of times to get it back to how it originally was. But I can still open up my text animation composition, click on the Shatter Effect, and I can still affect the lighting of the actual item. So if I open that up, I can change the ambient lighting, say, and make it a little bit brighter still. I can change the light intensity, because I'm still using the lightings in here without actually using the lighting in my final composition. Go back to my shatter composition, and that upgrades. It's not going to look massively different because my light's quite intense. If I turn my intensity down, you can see the difference. I'm going to change this ambient lighting, turn my ambient lighting right up, I think. There we go, turn the ambient lighting right up, go back to my shatter composition, and you'll see that that's updated. Maybe that's a bit much because I've got a bit of artifacting, probably due to the glass effect. But you get the idea. You can play around with these as much as you like and get some really interesting results that can look fascinating. So that's how you can use the shatter effect on text. But what if we want to have a shape layer? Well, let's go back to our text animation comp with all the original bits and pieces in it, and let's create a new layer. Make sure nothing is selected, and I'm going to choose now the shape tool, and I'm going to choose the star. Click on the star, draw in here, hold the space bar to pull it into the middle. I'm going to open up the polystar and just make a couple of minor changes. I'm not going to do an awful lot on this. Inner radius, outer radius. There you go. That's all we're going to change. Close that up, turn it off, go back to my shatter effect, and under shape, at the moment I've got text, I can drop that down and I can choose shape layer. And it changes to an extruded shape, which has got exactly the same bits and pieces applied to it. The same animation, the same glass-like look. If I actually go back to my shatter comp, you'll see the whole thing's done. So that's how you can play around with shatter to create some very interesting bits and pieces. The only thing that I certainly haven't been able to do, and I don't believe you can do with shatter, is get these to animate on in the same way that we could with the duplication method, where we can actually create an extruded shape that animates on. Unfortunately, shatter is only going to look at the very first frame of the layer. So if I was to animate my shape layer over time, Shatter wouldn't pick that up. Anyway, I hope you found this one useful. In the next tutorial I'm going to be looking at the plugin Zaxworks, and also having a little bit of a conversation about some of the 3D applications and the advantages and disadvantages that you might find for that workflow. My name's Andrew Devis. Thank you for watching.